Hello everyone, welcome again to our academy. We are going to continue our course how to think logically, and we are going to talk today about types of thinking. We already know that we have different types of knowledge or cognition, like internal feeling, sensation, imagination, and cognition by the mind. The mind enables us to think, and thinking requires a matter and a form. Today, let's talk a little about types of thinking. We have seen this question before. What is justice? We want to understand what is justice. So the first type of thinking is thinking to understand. To understand what is justice, we need a definition. So we may say justice is giving everyone what he, she, or it deserves. So the first type of thinking is thinking to understand. In this type of thinking, we think to reach a definition. After understanding what is justice, we may try to judge justice. Is justice good? So the second type of thinking is thinking to judge. To judge justice, or to say justice is good or not good, we need an evidence. Someone may say justice leads to happiness, and everything leads to happiness is good, so justice is good. This is an evidence. So we have two types of thinking: thinking to understand and thinking to judge. In the first type of thinking, thinking to understand, we think to reach a definition. In the second type of thinking, thinking to judge, we think to reach an evidence. Let's see another example. What's courage? First, we think to understand. We think to reach a definition. Someone may say that courage is to control your fear and anger, to do the right thing. Is courage good? We think to judge or to make an evidence. Someone may say that courage leads to protection of ourselves, our lives, our rights, and so on. And everything does so is good, so courage is good. What's religion? First, we think to understand or to make a definition. Religion, in a wide definition, is a group of beliefs and rules. So, is religion important? We think to judge or to make an evidence. If we define religion as we have just said, so of course it's important. Everyone requires some sort of religion, some sort of beliefs, and some sort of rules to control and guide his life. Let's see this example together. Is hemlock a neurotoxin? What are you saying? I can't understand you. That's right. First, we need to understand what's hemlock and what is a neurotoxin. After that, we may be able to judge, is hemlock a neurotoxin or not. So, as you may have noticed, understanding always comes before judgment. So let's try to understand. To understand, we need to think, to make a definition. So we need a definition of hemlock and a definition of neurotoxin. So let's try to think, to understand what's hemlock, to reach a definition to hemlock. As we said in the previous lesson, thinking requires previous data and to arrange this data in a proper form. So we need some data about hemlock, and you are going to arrange this data in a form of a definition. If we do this process, we may reach a definition of hemlock like, hemlock is a flowering herbaceous plant native to Europe and in North Africa. The same process applies to neurotoxin. It's a toxin which attacks the nervous tissue in the host body. So, this is the first type of thinking. Thinking to understand, or thinking to make a definition. And like any other thinking, it requires matter, previous data, which are going to be arranged in a proper form, a form of a definition here. After we understand what's hemlock and what's a neurotoxin, we may try to judge, is hemlock a neurotoxin? And as we said, judgment requires an evidence. The proper type of evidence here is an experimental one. We must apply an experiment on hemlock to know, is it a neurotoxin or not? So, the second type of thinking is thinking to judge, and it requires evidence. So now we know that we have two types of thinking. Thinking to understand or understanding. It's also called conception. To understand something is to have a concept about it, and it's also called apprehension. Understanding requires a definition. The second type of thinking is judgment. To judge something is to have a belief about it. So this type is also called belief or assent. Judgment requires an evidence. These are the two types of thinking, and understanding always comes first. Let's see these examples together. Your friend doesn't understand what are spark plugs, which are present in his car's motor. And because he doesn't understand what they are, he can't judge changing them is important or not. So he didn't change them. So his car broke down. Lack of proper understanding will lead to lack of proper judgment, and it's going to affect our life in a bad way. Another example, someone may want to understand himself, to understand what is a human being. Some people define a human being to be just an animal, ignoring his mind, soul, conscience, and so on. This wrong understanding will lead to wrong judgments. Like, for a human being to be happy, he must follow his instincts only, his lust, his anger, and so on. This leads to a life full of pornography, crime, wars, and so on, just like animals. So wrong understanding leads to disasters. Another example, you may understand someone very well. This man hates you and you know so. And he comes to you and tells you that your wife is cheating on you. You understand him very well. But the problem here is in the judgment process. You know this man hates you, so his word is not a proper evidence. If you believe him, you may destroy your marriage, and your wife may be innocent. So, right judgment requires a proper evidence. The same thing applies to Britain. In the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, data and facts have shown that it has a very widespread rate and it's fatal to about 2% of the population. This data can be used to make a proper evidence that countries must apply lockdowns and preventive measures very well. Britain ignored these solid data and followed a weak hypothesis that if we let the virus to spread widely, a herd immunity will develop. So, Britain ignored the strong evidence and followed a weak evidence. And this led to a disaster. The total deaths raised rapidly in Britain. So we have different types of knowledge: internal feeling, sensation, imagination, and knowledge by our minds. Our minds enables us to think. Thinking has two types: understanding and judgment. Understanding requires a definition. Judgment requires an evidence. Every thinking process requires a matter and a form. So, to make a definition, we need matter and form. We need previous data and we arrange them in the form of a definition. And to make an evidence, we need also matter and form. We need previous data and we arrange them in the form of an evidence. Understanding always comes first before judgment. To understand well, we need a proper and a right definition. To judge well, we need a proper and a right evidence. We are going to talk about this in details in our course. So follow us and thank you.